This conference will now be recorded.
In this section, we continue discussing our se- positive security building process. So let's start with enforcement readiness period. This period allows ASM to accumulate data from request for staged entities which are seen in the traffic so that it can build our own security policy. There are two key points about staging. One being that it is a period for ASM to learn the elements of your application. And second being it prevents false positive by not blocking on a violation. Which after you change the policy mode to blocking, the policy should not block valid application traffic. And in this process, there are various entities which are subject to the learning process. So these entities, as we have been discussing, can be like file types, URLs, parameters, cookies, attack signatures, redirection domains. All this help us expedite the learning process. And each of these elements have their own attributes. For example, like for file types, we might have the URL length, the request length, query string length, post data length. For URL, we might see meta characters or illegal content type violations. For parameters, we can have parameter names, its settings. For cookies, it can be header values. For attack signatures, it can be character strings. For redirection domains, it can be the IP address or domain name. So now when we are viewing the learning suggestions and staging status, there are two options to it. Option one is use the traffic learning page. This page will give you all the learnings corresponding to your application and will also provide you a action tab where what is it that you want to take action. So it would be something like, as we have been seeing here, you will get all your suggestions. Let's say illegal file type, and in file type you will have the type of the file that has been detected, let's say .gif. And once you select this specific learning suggestion, with respect to this you'll have different options. So what is it that you want to do? Accept the suggestion or delete the suggestion or ignore the suggestion. And once you click on accept, the accept file type gets added in your allowed file list on your security policy. So before you accept, you also have to see the at the bottom what is the action that ASM is suggesting. ASM action would define, let's say, add file type and matched. What is the file type which is matched? Matched file type is, let's say, .gif. Now, along these learning suggestions, some can be false positive, some can be valid across the application. So you have to work closely with your web application development team and continuously modify this allowed file list type according to your application. With respect to all this, you will have again different attributes set for each file type or each URL or each cookies. So this is first option wherein you can see the various learning suggestions. And then the option 2 is using the enforcement readiness summary. As mentioned previously, by default, staging occurs for 7 days, which is the enforcement readiness period by default. And you can change it as per your requirement. Maybe adjust the period for a longer or shorter duration. So now in this enforcement readiness summary screen, you will have different entities, and then with respect to different entities, you will have different options. So the concepts would be shown something like this. Uh, let's say if you consider this is your enforcement readiness summary, you will have defined the entity type and what is the scheme. Let's say learn new entities. For each of the entity type, what is the learning scheme that we have set? How many are total and how many are not enforced? How many are not enforced and have suggestions? And how many are ready to be enforced? So when you say see this not enforced, this means that the file type, let's say entity we consider as file types. You will have different entities in the enforcement readiness summary screen. File types, HTTP URLs, parameters, all that we have discussed till now. And with respect to this, what is the learning method that is set? So, for example, let's say always. Let's say total of 5 file types have been detected till now, and all of them are not enforced. Let's say this is 0 and this is 0. So when you say see this not enforced tab, this term is synonymous with staging. It means that the request for these file types are not blocked, even if the requests vary greatly in categories like request length or maybe post byte data length or any other attributes which differ. So these entities are still in staging period. Then once you click on this link, this will be just a hyperlink, similar to an hyperlink. So once you click on this, you will be landed over to the allowed file type screen. in the allowed file type screen, you again have different options which are available. So it would be something like this. You will have the types defined. Let's say this is your asterisk. Let's say GIF or PHP. And with respect to this, you will have different attributes: URL length, request length, query string length, post data length, and staging. So this you will see, if all these entities are currently not enforced, you will see the staging as this symbol. It will say staging as yes, and it will be shown as with this symbol. So this means the learning suggestions are available, or it is ready to be enforced. So if it is ready to be enforced, it would be something like, the symbol would be something like this. So and there can be different situations, whether uh, it has learning suggestions, or it has already selected those suggestions and now it is ready to be enforced. It has already seen defined set of samples corresponding to that file types. So the learning period is already complete, and now this is ready to be enforced. So now let's also understand the resetting of enforcement readiness period. Let's say your application continuously receives 1,000 byte requests for a single staged file type for 6 days. So by default, we know that enforcement period is 7 days. So for first 6 days, we continuously see that 1,000 byte of request for a single staged file is arriving on ASM. So ASM will track this 1,000 byte attribute during this staging period. Let's say on the seventh day, a new request for same resource is made, but this time it is 1,100 bytes. So because this specific request is again a deviation from your suggestion which have been learnt till now, the ASM again will reset your enforcement readiness period to 0 and start over. So staging period basically ends when the entity has no accumulated suggestions for the enforcement readiness period. And in manual policies, after 7 days, there are no more learning suggestions which are accumulated, and nothing else actually happens. So now let's go back to our F5 appliance and do some lab related to all the concepts that we have discussed till now. So on our F5, if I go to the traffic learning page, I would see various suggestions for, let's say, the file types which have been detected when traffic was initiated for that specific application. So let me just select these: no extension, GIF, or PHP, and let's add this to our security policy. So this learning page had only very few suggestions. That's why I could just move my cursor around and select all of these. Otherwise, if you want, if let's say you have multiple hundreds or thousands of learning suggestions, then you want to filter. So you can use this magnifying icon, go to the suggestion section. From here, move it to matched entity type, and then in here, choose the file type, select enter. So you'll get the learning suggestion. Now let me go to application security, file types, allowed file types. Right, I think it is not accepted. Let me again go back, policy building, traffic learning. Let me filter it this way. File type, apply filter. Now again, let me go back to my file types in my security policy. So in here, I will see that all this have been added to my security policy. And if you see, the staging is currently yes for these entities. This is the icon I was discussing about. So at present, the learning suggestion is not complete. It is waiting for additional traffic samples. And if this would have been ready to be enforced, then the icon would change here. Now, let me just select the explicit file types like GIF, no extension, and PHP, and enforce them. When you say enforce, it is nothing but moving out these specific entities from staging. So after I click on enforce, always make sure that you apply the policy. Now let me again go back to my application and complete the step for selling an item. So I've completed the selling of a specific entity on my application. Now let me again go back to my traffic learning scheme, traffic learning page, and look for, let's say, parameter this time. You would see different options with respect to your parameter. So now let's choose all the learning suggestions which are related to parameter and accept the suggestions and enable staging on them. After this, you apply the policy. Let me again go back to my application, and let's say in our search field, I just type percentage H and click on go. Now, with respect to this request, let me again go back to my traffic learning scheme page. Let's see if it triggered a suggestion. Okay, this is the page. This is the specific request. Illegal meta character in the value. The parameter which is detected is Q. So let me just accept this. Then click on apply policy. And then we go to our application security and we view the parameter list. Let's say I click on the specific parameter that we have accepted the suggestion related to. And now with respect to this parameter, let me click on value meta characters. In here, you will see the meta character percentage, which is disallowed. So at present, since we have accepted this, it is allowed. The state is allowed. Now, with respect to all these requests, let me go ahead and clear my event logs. And also, let me clear all the traffic learning. So before we clear the traffic learning page, let's also understand um, a learning score, the concept of learning score. So basically, each violation is assigned a percentage value. So in here, which you see like 100% or 5%, sometimes you would see 10%, 20%. So this basically reflects the progress of learning for each entity or any item. And this is This percentage value is called your learning score. So for each ASM request, ASM so for each request, ASM tracks the maybe the original what originating IP address has initiated this request, the time the HTTP session was opened, how many requests have been made. So if you just click on this specific suggestion in here, in this section, you will be able to see all the requests which have been generated. So how many different requests have been initiated, which resulted into this violation. So based on that, the learning score keeps on increasing. The high rated illegal request will lower the score, and if these are low rated requests, this will increase the learning score, which means that whether the requests are trusted, whether the request is coming from WAN side or coming from LAN side. If it is coming from LAN side, there are more chances that this will be trusted. If it is coming from WAN side, there are high chances that it will not be trusted. Now, when we talk about trusted and untrusted traffic, there is also a concept of trusted IP address. So when we are building a security policy, you have the option to specify one's IP address as a trusted IP address. And all requests arriving from that IP address will be considered safe or valid. So if you have an intention that you have to build your security policy quickly, so all you need to do is from the system where you are initiating the traffic, add that IP address as a trusted IP address. So how do you add that? You go to security, application security, then IP address exception. So in this specific setting of your security policy, you would be adding the trusted IP address. You click on create and fill in all the details, IP address, network mask, and use this IP address to build your policy. So you enable this specific option, policy builder, trusted IP address, and then click on create. So till now we have discussed about the various learning schemes. The fourth option of learning which we have missed is the compact. So let's discuss a bit about compact learning mode. This can be described as a discriminating version of always. In always we have seen that all the entities are always being learned and suggestion is provided and it gets added to your security policy explicitly. So what would happen in compact mode is a learning suggestion to add a new entity. Let's say a new entity is detected, GIF. A learning suggestion to add a new entity is only generated when its learning score is 100%. So only when ASM has processed a set of um, requests for that specific entity, then the learning score becomes 100%, and only then this will be added as a learning suggestion on your learning page. On your traffic learning page, only then you will get a suggestion related to that entity. compact mode is, intended to alleviate the concern that some administrators may have to be process potentially large number of false positives that might occur when entities are being learned, maybe as always, because with always you would get a suggestion even for a single request. So this compact method is not available in version 12. It starts with version 13. It creates a compact list for the defined file types and then give you a suggestion once it has already processed some set of samples corresponding to that request. Now let's try to understand this and do a lab corresponding to our compact mode. Let's first delete or clear all our parameters. Now again, we'll go to our policy settings to modify the learning method for parameters. So in here, let's expand for the parameter section. At present, the learning scheme is selective. Let's change it to compact. Click save and then apply the security policy. I think I have already deleted the previous learning traffic suggestions. If not, let's delete that first. Okay, let's delete all this. Now let me go back to my website and in the search tab, let's search for ABC123 and then click on go. Again, I will go back to my ASM and refresh the learning page. So with respect to this, I would have seen different learning suggestions, but there are no learning suggestions corresponding to parameter. Now, let me create a trusted IP address, application security, IP address exception. Click on create. And I'm going to use this source for building my security policy. I just click on create. After this, I apply the policy. So before we generate the request again, let us again go back to our traffic learning page and just ensure that with respect to this request which we initiated, search.php q is equal to abc123, there are no learning suggestions at this moment. Now we will again go back to our application and generate similar request again. Now let's go back again to our traffic learning page and refresh this. In here, you see that there is a illegal parameter suggestion and the learning score is showing as 100%. So we just select this and accept the suggestion, put it in staging, apply the policy. So anything, any request which are generated from a trusted IP address, you would instantly see that the learning method or the learning score is showing as 100%. So what I've done now is I just selected that parameter and applied it, put it on staging and then applied the policy. So now let me again go back to my parameter section and view the parameter list. So with respect to Q, with respect to the wildcard, let's try to locate the data type. Data type is alphanumeric and the maximum length is set as 10 bytes. Now let me again go back to the parameter list and select this Q parameter. With this Q parameter, again, the data type is set as alphanumeric and the maximum length is set as 10 bytes. Now let's generate a longer request. So in the search field, I will generate a request, let's say for 20 digits. And then click on go. So this specific request will exceed the maximum length of 10 bytes which have been set for our parameters, be it wildcard or the Q parameter. So now let me again go back to my traffic learning scheme. And I'll see that there is a suggestion saying illegal parameter value length. So since I have generated a request which is more than what has been set in your security policy, so it is set as 10 bytes. I generated a request longer than that. So it gave me a suggestion that the parameter value length is illegal because it is not in compliance with the security policy. So in here, I select the specific learning suggestion and click on accept suggestion. After this, I just apply the policy. So after applying this, let me again go back to my parameters, the parameter list. Let me go back to the settings for Q parameter. In here, you see the value has been modified to 25 bytes. So this is how you can view different suggestions and accept it so that it modifies your security policy as per your requirement. So with this, we complete the positive security policy building section. Thank you.